All right, well, welcome everybody to this webinar, The Middle Schools We Need Now. We'll introduce ourselves and then we'll jump right in. I am Ann Perez. I am the Director of Professional Learning and an Associate at Creative Leadership Solutions. I was a middle school teacher, a middle school principal, an Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, and I had one little stint in high school as an assistant principal. And I will turn it over to Drew.
Hey, I'm Drew Tomlin, currently the principal of Heritage Middle School in Westerville, Ohio. I'm going on into year 7 here at this schoolhouse. Prior to that, I was an administrator and a teacher in Atlanta, Georgia. And prior to that, I was a teacher in tropical Harrisonburg, Virginia.
And you
So,
were
yeah.
also the director for middle.
Oh, yeah. At one point, I was the director of middle level services for the Association for Middle Level Education, also known as AMLE. So I did that job for about 4 years as well. So thank you for, I forgot about that part.
Yes, you forgot. All right, Cedric.
Awesome. I am Cedric Gray. I'm also an associate with Creative Leadership Solutions. I am a former teacher, assistant principal, and school superintendent. My most proudest moments, though, were as middle school superintendent and middle school principal in 2 school districts, as well as superintendent of the year in Jackson, Mississippi. And I still have a little bit of hair after all of these journeys. But I was also two-time president of the Tennessee Association for Middle Schools here anchored here in Memphis. Great to be here.
Okay, all right. Well, we're going to go ahead and jump in. We are going to change our format just a little bit today. Since we're a bit smaller, we had some breakout rooms planned, but because we're small, this will just be one big old breakout room. So you will get these slides after the webinar with the recording as well. And on here is except for I spelled Cedric's email correctly, those are our real phone numbers. So if you get done with this webinar, you're like, oh, I'd really like to ask Drew a question, please feel free to call us. We always like to give out our own phone numbers and emails. It's part of our sharing that we do at Creative Leadership Solutions. All right, our norms for today are please ask questions at any time. You can use the chat box or just unmic since we're small. We ask that you fully engage, and we also ask that you share any expertise that you have or questions in our back channel, which I will put that in the chat as soon as I can figure out where it is. And this is what I like to call it, just crowdsourcing. It's just a Google Doc, and we may talk about something, and I just like to collect these for people so that we're sharing our best practices. So if you can add those ideas on that Google Doc, that would be fantastic. And then it's linked in the presentation, so when you get the slides, you'll have that as well. All right, our learning goals for this webinar are to explore 3 aspects of middle schools and best practices to realize them. Now, there's more than these 3 aspects, please know that, but we did have to narrow it down to one short webinar. And then we're going to discuss and share practices with other middle level educators in relation to academic, social, personal, and behavioral development. Our agenda today is to just talk very quickly about what makes middle school a little bit different. Then we'll jump into those 3 tenets of academic or instruction, personal, social, and behavioral. I do want to give everyone a quick recap of the middle school movement, because I think this is one that is not widely known. And it starts in 1963, running to 1979. This is kind of when the movement begins. In 72, the National Middle School Association was founded. It did not produce its first publication until 1982, which was actually in response to A Nation at Risk. And if you don't know what A Nation at Risk is, that was that big report that told us that the high schools weren't doing a great job. And the National Middle School Association said, yes, I understand you're looking at high school students, but we need to talk about middle school students because they're a little bit different. In 89, the regents adopted policy for middle level education. And then in 1995, the National Middle School Association introduces this idea of developmentally responsive middle schools, and they continue to refine this, we believe. In 2007, now mind you, we started in 1963. It wasn't until 2007 that the first specific mention of middle school is made in federal policy. And we've got the elementary act, we've got the secondary act, but there is nothing out there for middle school. And that was the first mention of it. And then in 2020, this, we believe, then became The Successful Middle School, which is a book that we all recommend that you check out. So it's just good to have a nice little, this whole idea around middle schools is not new. And then what makes middle schools different are these very specific structures that we'll talk about today that are embedded in just the day in the life of a middle school teacher, student, and the way that you do business. First one of those is that interdisciplinary teaming. Advisory is another big one. It goes from being kind of like a homeroom in elementary school to being advisory in middle school. Exploration or exploratory classes. We want the students just having lots of exploration. Student voice becomes very important with young adolescents. And then the students themselves are just part of what makes middle school different. So if you've not worked with a young adolescent, ages 10 to 15, they are their own unique breed, and they bring their own flavor and spice to middle school that makes them different. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Cedric, and he's going to chat a little bit about the academic and instruction for young adolescents.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anne. So why is it important that we differentiate middle school instruction in academia from the other areas? So according to the Successful Middle School, This We Believe text that Anne was referring to, there are three things that teaching requires that be different. First is that it requires that teachers are specifically prepared to teach adolescents. And really what we mean by that is to really fully understand and appreciate that middle school students or middle school scholars aren't just big elementary students or just small high school students. But these adolescents require special considerations that are related to physical and intellectual and emotional growth. The second thing that is important when considering middle school academic and instruction is that teachers possess a deep understanding of content, right? Literally, they have to understand their content enough that middle school teachers and leaders develop a bridge, not just bridge the gap, but create the bridge itself, right? From the transition from elementary school, primary and intermediate grades, all the way over to ninth grade, to high school. And that's an important distinction. The last thing is it's important also instructional practices to be specific for middle school or adolescents. Is that the curriculum and instructional practices be challenging and engaging. And so we're going to spend the next couple of slides talking about those challenging and engaging instructional practices. First up is mathematics. Ooh, an exciting topic for those of us who may not have been mathematically inclined in school, but there are four specific strategies that I am promoting here or actually presenting here. And we'll just highlight each one of these and maybe add a little bit more specifics to them. In mathematics for middle schools, teachers and leaders need to implement tasks that promote reasoning and problem solving. In other words, tasks that develop both critical thinking, such as word problems and or multi-step problems. This helps fire off those synapses in middle school that help connect what we talked about before, this bridge that middle school teachers and leaders are developing. Secondly, another instructional practice is to use and connect math representations. Now, what I mean by math representations are to use literally things like the base 10, number lines, and algebraic equations. The third piece in mathematics is to facilitate meaningful math discourse. Now, this is meaningful. What we mean by meaningful math discourse is really thinking aloud about math, right? Sequencing, connecting concepts, and asking questions, having the scholars themselves ask questions about their work and say things like, well, you figured it out. You've got the answer you've solved the problem, but how did you figure it out? Using what we technically call metacognition, thinking about your thinking. So how did you, not only do you just have the answer, you bubbled in C, but how did you get to that answer? And the last is posing purposeful questions. And that's literally an exact science, right? So that not that we ask who all got the correct answer, but posing questions that help probe deeper thought about mathematical practices. So that is our focus on mathematics in terms of middle school instruction.
Cedric, would you say that those are also good for other subject areas? I know you've got it labeled as math, but I can see almost every subject area in this. Can you
You
maybe talk about that?
absolutely can. So as a matter of fact, I mean, here's the secret. Here, there's a secret. Don't tell anybody until the end of this webinar. But good first teaching applies to everything, right? So this is how masterful these particular practices are, but they have a special connection to math because of the development, the spiral nature of math, in that there's a through line that's developed. So for example, there are concepts that we literally develop in kindergarten, first and second grade, like geometry, right? That flow all the way through to high school. But there's a special emphasis in middle school, mainly because this is the connection that we go from the concrete to the abstract. And this is where mathematical practices are really key in the middle school, so that adolescents begin to think more broadly about math. So the concept of, for example, knowing that 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 is 25 begins to resonate greater when we talk about 5 times 5, say in third grade, and then we talk about 5 squared as we enter into adolescence. And then we begin to use algebraic expressions, the Pythagorean theorem, and so on and so forth. All of those things connect through these specific strategies. So yes, Anne, you're right. These approaches apply to all, but especially middle school and especially math, for the development of the concrete to the abstract thinking in mathematics. All right, don't you love this little emoji? Those are Jordans I'm wearing, by the way. All right, sorry, that's a little middle school of me coming out. All right, so let's, so that we don't dominate the whole webinar, let's talk just about a couple of these in English language arts. So my favorite instructional practice in English language arts is the closed reading structure. And this is the way I associate closed reading in middle school is really thinking aloud about how you are reading, and then the annotation and the purposeful approach to reading. So literally, this sounds, when you at first glance, this sounds a little bit like, oh, these are things that you use in elementary school as scholars are going from learning to read to reading to learn, reading to learn to learning to read. But closed reading in itself, when we talk about more complex and higher lexile levels in middle school, is important, especially when we talk about reading for a purpose. So if we're reading, let's use that as an example, reading to seek author's purpose. Close reading is annotating and thinking aloud and note-taking as you are reading. But reading so with a purpose. So we don't want the scholars highlighting the entire text that they read, but we want to help them to identify what they're reading and why they're reading it. And literally thinking aloud, asking yourself, of this text, what does the author want us to know? Are they trying to inform us? Are they trying to instruct us? Are they trying to entertain us? And when we think about how you guide middle schoolers through that, it helps them to determine this higher level, right? So they can think more about their thinking as they're reading and become stronger readers. The second piece of this is the text-dependent questions. Now, I know, we don't teach so that our scholars pass the state test, but we have to teach so that they're prepared to pass the state test. And now, oftentimes that means when they find the answer in the reading and support their answer with the reading, they're using text-dependent questions. So in other words, when you find the answer to the question, not only do you have that, you need to also refer back to it when you're reading, when you're answering questions related to reading. These are instructional practices, again, as Ann has referred to, that are great any grade level in any area, but especially in the middle school because of the development that adolescents are making, transitioning from concrete to more abstract thinking. The other two, pre-reading, the other three, using text sets to build background knowledge. Of course, again, this points to novels, right? And using lexile levels and novels that are related specifically to middle school, as well as pre-reading strategies. Again, thinking before you begin to read. We're developing the thoughtful reader in the middle school so that when they arrive at high school texts, then they're more able to do those things. All right, so I feel like that I'm taking way too much time. I was supposed to be 3 to 5 minutes. It felt like 10. So can we pause then and reflect a little bit in some discussions of the ones that you have seen? Maybe just pick two. Which of those two instructional practices do you feel like you could institute immediately, and why?
Actually, we have enough people. I'm going to send everybody to breakout rooms. So
Oh,
you can
okay.
have a smaller conversation. Maybe you
Yep.
love something here. I'm going to go ahead and open those. We'll give you a few minutes in there and then we'll pull you back.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so now, okay, so yeah, so we talked about, how we, Lisa used the terms, strategy groups to help students become better readers and focus on those areas of need. And then we also talked about how do you make sure that while you're filling, not filling in gaps, but how you're helping students with their literacy challenges, that you also don't snuff out their passion for reading. By, yes, we need to focus on informational text. That's very critical, but we also need to make sure that the flame for reading continues to be lit going forward. Not, as the kids say, keep it lit.
Keep it lit. That's right.
And
Okay.
I'll summarize a little bit that the team really talked more about this idea of discourse, right? Having the scholars talk to one another and to the teacher, right? So the guiding them is really important because middle school every day is a little crazy, right? There's a little bit of crazy in every day, but allowing them an opportunity to talk with one another helps build their confidence for next levels.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about why it is a little bit crazy. And let's talk about the personal social aspect of middle school. And this first bullet, which is at no other time outside of birth through the age of 3 does the brain develop as rapidly as it does during the middle school years. Now just let that sink in for a minute. At no other time besides birth to 3 does the brain develop in the way it does in middle school. And we have to constantly remind ourselves of that because for the longest time, middle school was considered the black hole. If anybody's long enough to remember when that was a thing in education. Young adolescents are in transition from moral reasoning that focus on what's in it for me to consideration of the feelings of rights of others, also known as fairness and justice. So this is when for them, that fairness and justice stage really starts to develop and they are very into themselves, which that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. But they're moving in and out of that because as they grow through middle school, they start to take on the world as a larger context. So they get very comfortable with themselves and very selfish, moving to this larger world view. That's why exploration is so important. And honestly, that's why the discourse piece is so important because we want them talking. And then from Piaget, the child no longer merely obeys and commands given by the adult, but they obey the rule itself. but it's been generalized and applied in an original way. So as a middle school principal, I always said their perception is their reality. And this is where this comes to play. So when we're working with students, we always have to keep in mind that their perception is their reality. Middle school students are not, and Cedric said this at the beginning, they are not big elementary school students and not small high school students. They are their own people. And for us to treat them any other way is unfair to their unique needs. One of the things I used to tell my 8th grade teachers all the time is we are not preparing the kids for high school. We are preparing them to be the best 8th grade students that they can be. And we have to focus on that because their development and their needs are a little bit different. If we do our job in middle school, they will be ready for high school. They're developing their identity and where they perceive to fit in or define normal. This was always my favorite of being a middle school principal, that kids just wanted to fit in or be normal. And the truth is there is no normal in middle school. And then this last one is that they really benefit from caring adults who are specifically trained to work with the young adolescent age group. And this is one that when people go through a middle level certification, they actually take adolescent development courses because their needs are different. So it's important to know who you're working with and how to meet their needs. They benefit from exposure to people and experiences, authentic situations that help them develop themselves and relationships. Again, they're seeking for their own identity. And just multiple opportunities to think about who they are and develop that for themselves. Opportunities to grow their perspective and understanding of the world around them. Again, it's a natural curiosity because of the way that their brain is developing. So we want to make sure that we're giving them lots of opportunities. They also benefit from a lot of patience. I always used to say they need us the most and they make themselves the most unlovable. I think Lou Holtz used to say something like that. But love, kindness, and patience is one of the most important things that middle school students need. How do we do that? Number one is set up your comprehensive counseling program so that it's designed to meet the needs of the young adolescents and align it with the American School Counseling Association model. For those of you that are administrators, if you're not familiar with that model, make yourself familiar with it. We use teaming structures that include social opportunities. So teaming is how we make the big school feel small. Teachers share students in common, taking it down to 2, 3, 4 teachers just can take the school, and that's who they see throughout the day. Within that teaming structure, we have to make sure that we're creating social opportunities so that, again, that they can practice. The advisory structure that provides time in the day to develop personal, social skills and relationships. That's not the only time that we should be doing it, but it does set aside time specifically dedicated to that. And we want to make sure that we have programming that includes a focus on health and wellness, social emotional competencies, and self-advocacy. I always considered myself successful as a middle school principal if the kids could advocate for themselves by the time they left 8th grade. Because they do come in they come in as 6th graders or whatever the configuration is, not quite knowing how to advocate for themselves, but lots of experience and practice. They learn that they're going to go to high school and they're going to survive because we did our job preparing them in 8th grade to advocate for themselves. And then on a smaller scale, this is a big one for me because they need voice. Let them sit where they want at lunch. I see a lot of middle schools that assign seats at lunch, and I was guilty of it my first year as principal. I said, you have to sit in your advisory at these tables. And I wish I could go back and apologize to the kids at my first building because I didn't make them sit where they want, I made them sit in contrived places. Let them have a say in the seating charts in the classroom. Help them learn how to choose good working partners. That's the key. If I want to let you sit at places and give you that voice and choice in things, then I have to also help you to learn how to make good choices. And then help them to learn how to interact with adults while they self-advocate. And then on a smaller scale is create opportunities for them to have a voice and say in the daily operations. As a principal, and I'm sure Drew and Cedric had this as well, I had an advisory council. And it was really just for the students to come and chat with me, tell me what was going on, what was going well, what they would change if they were in charge of the school, just really good input from the kids. And this is a big one, especially in the classroom. Let them just be unique, and then help them to understand that there is no normal. If the kid has something that they like to do and it's not hurting anybody and everybody can still learn, go ahead and let them do it. And then this last one is a big one for me, is let them have a say in their schedule. I'm not a big fan of prerequisites. I like students to have choice in what they're taking. And I do not like to hold students back from advanced courses if they want to take the courses. So that's a big one for me. But again, it's all about their voice and choice. So let's have we've gotten smaller since our last breakout. So we'll do our discussion here of how does your school help young adolescents grow their personal and social self? So let's chat about some of those ideas.
Going on in the middle grades, come on.
You love talking about behavior at middle
That is true. So we'll start off with just a couple of reminders, just in case you didn't know that middle school students do have certain behavioral tendencies that make them unique. And that's why, this whole webinar is about the middle schools that we need now, not just, elementary or high school, but this is what middle schools are all about. So if you didn't already know that middle school kids can gravitate towards disruptive peers and groups for the feeling of being a part of a group and to feel safe. And so they can then act with that group. So many times I've had students in my office for disciplinary events and conversations, and maybe you have as well, where one-on-one, they know exactly what the answer is. They know exactly what they should have done. But when they get out with a group, and that's what we talk about, we say, hey, listen, this is the easy part. You're sitting with me, we're talking it out, we're coaching it out, we're doing some scenarios. Now, what's the hard part? It's when you're out in the hallways, in the lunchroom, in the cafeteria, in the bathrooms, all those unstructured times. So knowing that that's what students are all about and that they can have those tendencies, knowing that when you have a student in your office or classroom, wherever you're going to have that coaching session, that you talk through the stuff they really know what they need to do. They can often overreact to what adults would consider minor experiences of ridicule, embarrassment, rejection, or correction. All right. So yeah, we as adults, sometimes we look at the scenario through our adult mindset and we're like, why is this kid freaking out? I don't understand it. But remember what you were like between 11, 12, 13, 14, whatever that young adolescent band is, don't judge, just go ahead and understand they're going to react emotionally. Part of that is neurological, part of that is emotional. But yeah, so just know those two tendencies. So yes, they do enjoy fads. This is important, as you all know. Yes, we've gone past, knock on wood, the TikTok bathroom challenges. So fortunately, at least we've seen at Heritage that those destructive fads have kind of waned a little bit, but they still involve slang and cussing out and stuff like that, behaviors that they may discard. So once again, remembering what we were like when we were that age, we wanted to try things out, right? We wanted to see like, all right, hey, I heard this older kid or my older brother or my uncle or whoever lives down in the neighborhood use this word. I'm going to try it out at school. So yes, we can turn a student into a disciplinary form, but I'd much rather form a relationship with a kid and coach them up and talk them about, hey, listen, this is a slang term. Let's talk about what that really means and the different messages behind it. They can be impulsive. That's right. So they do things without necessarily thinking it all the way through. We have to be there when they make that mistake. So neurologically, totally, it's natural where they got all the bad ideas, all the, like I said, cuss words back here in the back, and then their frontal lobe are like soft brakes. They don't stop them before they do something. So, and Cedric brought up reading. So I think about behavior as well as also a literacy project, because reading is about, the expressive literacy and as well as receptive literacy. When you receive or read a situation, and then how do you express yourself once you've read that situation? So middle school kids can struggle in that same way. They might see, how many times have I had a kid in my office or talked in the hallway because they're all fired up because somebody gave them a side eye in class and I knew they were talking about me. And so they misread that situation, and then there's a bigger thing. So we have to be there to catch them in those moments to say, okay, let's talk about how we handle that. And of course, that's that last bullet, right? They need time and support to regroup and reflect. And like Ann reminded us, that type of SEL stuff is not just, hey, go down to the counselor and talk about that. No, that's everybody's job. That's everybody's responsibility. So remembering that and coaching up your teachers that it's not just being a content area expert, but you are an expert in working with young adolescents. And let's talk about what that looks like on the day-to-day. So keywords for this: relationships, relationships, relationships. We have cut down I'll just talk about Heritage. We had over, not the year before, we had over 400 suspensions. I'm not gonna lie, that's what we had. We cut that down to 200 this year. And I guarantee it's because we focused on relationships and restorative justice, right? So the relationships, we connected with kids, we got out there, we talked to them. That builds that trust. So not only when they had a disciplinary event, we could talk to them because we know them, but also they would come to us with information and say, hey, you better keep your eye on this situation right over here because there's about to be a fight after fourth period. They're all going to meet in the bathroom. So those relationships help in so many different ways with that behavioral work. Routines, that has been like, kids need to know what you expect every day. And you have to have a framework of those expectations and structures and stick to it. And then, like I said, that reflection piece before, during, and after a behavioral event. So that's a big one. And then remembrance, no judgment without acknowledgement. So like I said before, remember what you were like between 11 to 15 years old, and how did you solve problems? How did you manage time? How did you organize your emotions? All right. Sorry, I'm going super fast, so I apologize for that. Other keywords: clarity. I've been saying this recently to my own self, right? You got to be the person who's going to say the thing. Got to be the person who's going to say the thing. Meaning, if you see a student do something that is flagrantly in violation of your expectation that's holding your building together, right? Because culture and climate is about the little things that we let happen, right? So being clear and vocal about what you expect is really, really important. So be the person who's going to say the thing. Consistency with flexibility, though. Right. Of course, you have to have, if you want to help young adolescents grow and flourish, they need routines and structures. So they need to have that framework with, to understand what they're doing. So stick to it, but also bend. I'm never going to be one of those people that's like, hey, here's the disciplinary code, and this is where, this is what you did. Here's the number of times that you did it. And here's the referral that's going to happen, or the disciplinary consequence that's going to happen. But bending them in those moments, which can be tough, and it can be tough to convince your teachers and staff, especially like if you're going into a new school and you've got to let staff know, hey, listen, yes, you might send a kid down to the office, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get X, Y, and Z consequence. It might be a coaching conversation. It might be something less than that. It might be a family outreach. All right, visibility, that's the big thing with behavior. Get out there every period, every single day. That's how you lead by your feet. You get out there and you listen, you put your ear out there. I mean, how many times have I been able to get ahead of something by just asking a kid, hey, is there something I need to work on? I can see there's some tension. Is there anything I need to work on? And they'll either say yes, or they'll tell me no. And I'll say, okay, that's fine. And then everyone. So behavior is everybody's responsibility, teachers and staff. So you can have the best disciplinary matrix, you can have the best PBIS system, but unless everybody's buying in and involved and understands the why behind it, behavior is not going to change. Behavior is not going to change. So there are some structural things that you can put in place, some that Ann already mentioned. So advisory, for instance, 12 to 15 students, and that is a time to connect and check in. And if you want to email me and ask about advisory structures, go ahead, because we've been through every iteration of advisory here at Heritage. So I can tell you what's worked, what hasn't worked, what we got going up ahead. But advisory, how does it help with behavior? Same with teaming. Those two structures are key and set a middle school apart from a junior high model, because those are parts built into the schedule that actualize middle school philosophy, right? So it's about making a big school feeling smaller, and it's about a big school building better relationships. All right. So they help with behavior because those teachers that are on that team, or that teacher who's an advisor, really gets to know their students and can go ahead, and it's like they get to collect data on a smaller group of students every single day, behavioral data, and they can get ahead of it. All right. And it kind of closes the feedback loop, if you will. And then a responsive bell schedule. as much as you can, as much as you have control of that. Maybe, you know, Dr. Ann can help you out with that side of things, but minimal transitions, right? So that can always be helpful. So the more times you have kids out in the hallway, the more opportunity for there to be something to go sideways. And then if you can't control that and you have to have, you know, multiple transitions, try to keep the transitions short between classes. So if somebody's like, we need to have 5 minutes between classes. Nope. I would suggest 3 minutes, get the kids in there, get the kids out, because if not, that's when they'll linger a little bit. So yes, they need to have time to stretch their legs. We'll get to that next. Sorry, Ann, I'm going fast.
No, you're fine. I'm glad that you brought up bell times. I always wish there was like 3 minutes and like 30 seconds between a pastime, because that would have been perfect.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Drew. Sorry.
So recess and activity, and I've grown from this model a lot. So in a previous school that I worked at, it was, you know, we had 30 minutes of lunch, and then if you got a little bit of recess, then maybe it was okay, but usually we didn't. So there would be kids in our building who, if they didn't have PE, they didn't get a chance to be physically involved in anything, you know, stretching their legs or anything. So currently in our bell schedule, we have lunch, and then we have an additional 14 minutes of recess time outside. And yeah, it does provide, we do need supervision for that time. Because if you just say, hey, you know, we have 900 kids at our school. So we said, hey, 300 sixth graders, go outside and play. It can get a little wackadoodle if you don't have supervision. So recess and activity, gotta have it. Gotta have it, let them stretch their legs. PBIS, like I said before, whatever you want to call it, if it's positive behavioral intervention supports or systems, whatever, it's all about clear, specific expectations and those restorative opportunities, chances for kids to work together. We've done mediations here in the office and been able to solve all kinds of stuff. And then we also have a house system here. So a house system can provide an incentive-based way to help with behavior. So we have 3 houses here, and it's multi-grade. So 6th, 7th, and 8th grade are all one house working together, very Harry Potter-esque. But it provides healthy competition where they earn points throughout the year, earn parties and stuff like that throughout the year. And yes, it makes it extrinsic. And I know our goal is intrinsic, but we've got to get there somehow. So this is the way that we do it. And it really focuses that turn from we over me, because we know that young adolescents are very egocentric, very narcissistic. Hey, there are a lot of adults that are that way too, but it turns the me over to the we part. So that's some structural stuff. All right, so the big question is, and Ann, I don't know if you want to turn this into a separate Zoom room or if you want to just put this out to the group, but how does your school support young adolescents behaviorally, while also, and this is the key too, while also creating safe conditions for teaching and learning? Anything you're currently doing or any ideas you have, or I saw somebody put something in the chat.
All right, we'll just keep it here since we're small.